Is Blavatsky's work available unedited, or is what we see now, is it watered down?
I think what you can get right now is pretty okay. I mean, the books that I got, I found what I wanted to find.
Okay.
And of course, don't forget that there is a Theosophical Library over in London, and then also with the internet. Of course, we have to realize there is multiple translations of everybody's work, so that always needs to be sort of borne in mind. But I would say that what you get is pretty good. People can check out G.R.S. Mead, M-E-A-D. He was her secretary, and he's probably one of the best authorities on Blavatsky. Again, a very clear and distinct writer, himself an expert on Hermetic teachings. And there are books out. And again, go ahead and read the books that, criticize her and find out for yourselves. As I said, it's a mark of genius in a way to be contradictory. And I think that we've forgotten that. A lot of people today have really, really forgotten this. They sort of expect this kind of perfection, in people. I get this a lot in my work, I mean, I didn't know how to write a book when I wrote a book. And I didn't even think I was going to have to write one. You're not suddenly just an expert in the English language or any of these things, You're not an expert. Did I know that, years ago that you've got to source everything? No, you learn these things as you go, and you try to get better and better and better. And also then you find out that people who are thinkers, people who are really alive in their minds, will have these ambivalent personalities. They will be contradictory, and we have to handle that. We have to find our way through. It just comes with the territory. And to set yourself up and to critique people just because of that is very, very limited and prejudicial.
One of the things people seem to critique her about the most, though, are the seances. Was this true? And how does that tie into tarot and other esoteric knowledge like that?
Well, that part I don't know anything about, because I'm myself not interested in any of that. So I have never even really read up or studied the mediumistic work, which is mostly the bulk of what books are written on about her, about these various, spiritualistic kind of things that they were interested in, or the ascended master concept, all of that. I've got my own take on it, but I'm not interested in it, and I haven't read those anecdotes, so I really couldn't say anything about that, actually. I myself, again, always approach divination from a very scholastic point of view. I think that there's enough mysteries in the tarot and in astrology and in Kabbalah and numerology and these things that can be studied by anyone. Because I believe that these devices, these arts, are basically to help you develop these extrasensory levels of your being. And they also offer you the protection to do as well, so that you don't get, compromised spiritually or whatever. And that your beginnings, I believe these things can be used by the layman. You see, my philosophy is that you don't already need to be clairvoyant or sensitive. These things can be used in the most practical aspects of your life. And then you work from there. Again, remember, as I was saying, in that very individualistic way, in which then you let that teaching take you where it needs to go. It's you're doing the walking, you're doing the controlling. And therefore, if neurosis or psychic breakdown happens to occur to you, then to be blunt about it, you're to blame. What the institutions of the world have done, and what Christianity makes a lot of hay out of, is that anyone who happens to be interested in anything, the occult, I mean, you see the mainstream television in America is full of this. Hideous stories that just because some kid was wearing a Marilyn Manson t-shirt or something, and goodness knows if that kid should ever be involved in anything criminal or semi-criminal, now, the music and the occultism gets the blame. And so parents are obviously people who do this. Society does this, in which even if they can find a single occult connection, even the most meager one, then that gets the blame for every other kind of defect that actually originates with the broken society and the broken parents and the broken schools and all the rest of it. Society is hell-bent to never accept it, and so all forms of occultism, both the positive and the negative aspects of it, they get the blame. What I was talking about is that when you go on the journey with the divination arts or I Ching or whatever it is, and say that you have an interest in this thing, not all people, Chris, are good people. And the vast majority of people who get into occultism are particularly not good people. Again, this is just coming from me, so it's a personal, I can only speak from my own personal experience. So if then madness or some sort of neurosis or even criminal activity takes place, don't be blaming the occultism. Blame the person. Look at that, what they did. Who are these people? What did they get into this for? We have this sort of, are we that clueless to think that everybody starts in the same trap? Like a dog race? Everybody starts on the same line, at the same hurdle, and then after the gun is fired, they're all going to stay in a sort of uniform way? People do not start as uniform people. There's people who get into these subjects who are very, very spiritual and bright souls and intelligent and moral. And then there are deeply, deeply immoral people who are interested in this because they want power over people. They want to have sexual power, or they want to have other kinds of things that attract them. And therefore, if that person then meets demons, so to speak, are we really going to say, are we going to still be so primitive as to say, oh, the tarot is evil, astrology is evil? Hang on a minute. That just does not add up at all.
Well, that's amazing that you mentioned that, because that's what I tell people all the time, and I'm starting to wonder, does the Illuminati really have the truth? And if so, it's not the truth that makes them evil, it's what they do with it.
Well, that's a brilliant question, but so let's go like this. Let's take it like this. We might answer the question by saying, is there really a truth? Because that also could be the problem there. Is there really a truth, or is there only individual people's truth? You see, this is what we have to handle. If you were to ask me, I would say each person's truth is the truth. And of course, immediately when you say that, we would notice that there's a dark side to that statement. Because, oh, wow. It's very good to say it, because on the positive side is that everybody should walk their own path, everybody should come up with their own conclusions, everybody has the freedom to understand what is the truth, for themselves. The downside of that is that then that is tantamount to also saying, then I can do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. My truth leads me to believe that I can just, walk on other people, abuse the world, nothing matters. Ultimately, there's no ultimate reality. So I just live in a sociopathic way in which I just do whatever I feel like. Because in fact, that is the case, isn't it? If you go and interview any sociopath, they will always mitigate their behavior by saying, that's what I believed at the time, okay? I just do what I want to do. I don't believe in anybody else. I don't trust nobody but myself. You'll always find this.
Absolutely.
So this is again, fine line. It's a problem. Okay, take the opposite. Say I put a new hat on and go, no, there is only one ultimate spiritual truth. That is, again, has a very, very beautiful side to it. Because that will, then if you believe that, then you go, oh, I'm so glad to hear that, because I needed that. As a human being, I want to know that there's a higher purpose for everything. Somebody's told me that there's a higher truth. I really believe that, and now I'm going to seek for it. I'm going to look at religion. I'm going to look at atheism. I'm going to look at theosophy. I'm going to walk the earth. I'm going to learn about nature. I'm going to look into things, because there's this higher truth that all religions have spoken about, and you're going to go on that journey. However, there is also the dark side again. What's the dark side? The dark side of that is that some institution can come along and say, we are the only ones who have access to that higher truth. Oh, we didn't make it, but we are its ministers. And therefore now we have to subjugate you, we have to collectivize you, you have to do as we say, and the truth is not necessarily in your keeping. And we know this has in fact happened because every religious institution tells you this, and every Masonic type institution tells you this. They work entirely on the promissory note, that if you do as we say, tomorrow you will have this amount of knowledge, this level of arcane. And I'm not even going into whether or not this knowledge exists. I'm just pointing out the fact is there's a promissory level. And then you could subdivide that again. If a Mason was here with us, he'd say, but don't you understand, the reason why we do that is because we want to purify man. We don't want man, the ugly, contaminated person from the street with all of their prejudices and lunacy and disrespect to gain the kind of knowledge that we want. No institution does this. No school will allow it. No business will allow it. And you have to give them that. You go, yeah, you're right. You're quite right. In fact, I've said it myself on many occasions that, perhaps the impure person shouldn't have any, shouldn't or won't be able to gain knowledge. So in everything that you look at, you have this ambivalence. And this is what a lot of fundamentalist type people can't deal with. They cannot deal with that with, number one, reality is changing every minute. They can't deal with the fact that you have to think in terms of dialectics, opposites. If you hold a truth here, think about its opposite. If people could do this, there'd be no war, there'd be no destruction, because you'd already in your own mind be conceiving of what the antithesis is to the positions that you hold. And I always have said, and I'll say it again, I'll frame it again by saying, and that is not a collective action. If you hold, if you're able to have an opinion over here, and then you also create a kind of meditative state in which you're able, intellectual state, to conceive of its opposite, in that juggling act, in that weighing and balancing act, I mean, it happens in every single courtroom. It actually does go on in the mind continually anyway. What I'm describing is not esoteric. This actually does happen on a certain degree in the mind. But whatever changes will happen are going to happen individually for you. In some instances, you might have to give up an opinion, because by thinking about its opposite, you may go, something, I was wrong. So now I go with the antithesis. I accept that the opposite point of view is actually the more correct. This is what Socrates advised people to do. It's what all rational people should be doing. In many other instances, you'll say, I've weighed up the opposites. And no, I think they're false. I'm going to continue holding to this idea that I had originally. You see? But that is going to be an activity of absolutely nomothetic. It's going to be absolutely unique to you. It's not going to be reproducible by the next person, you see? And maybe it's the same thing with truth. Truth is, to me, I can never get away from thinking, you see, that truth is ultimately available to us when we are absolutely so aware of what is the false. And that is what is called apophatic learning, negation.
Can you spell that again for us? Apophatic?
Yeah, apophatic. A-P-O-P-H-A-T. I-C.
And it's basically being able to argue with yourself over what's real and what's not without having to go to other people.
No, you go to other people, but apophatic is basically breaking down, deconstruction. It's like forensics. It's like Sherlock Holmes. It's like what detectives do all the time. You sift through the information and you exclude whatever is impossible. And like Conan Doyle said in one of his books, once you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And that's what I mean. And there's various ways of doing this, but I don't believe there's any collective way of doing it. So in my mind, and I don't think I've ever been able to get past this myself, as soon as an institutionalized press release is released, that we have the truth, I'm already suspect then. If I see the us, the our, the we, in any kind of proximity to truth or speaking of truth, I'm already out of there. Because I really do believe that we are individuals. Our self is not the same type of self as everybody, even though we completely been mind controlled by the consensus people to believe this. I believe we're here absolutely for unique purposes. And therefore I believe our grasp of what is true, there's probably better words in other languages for this, but what is absolutely sustainable is absolutely unique to us. That doesn't mean that later on, after you've found your unique truth, that some other people might share it or come to a similar. That's probably bound to happen. But it's irrelevant. Ultimately, philosophically, it's irrelevant. What truth you come to is yours. And therefore, that is the way that you've arranged your reality. You remember sort of close to the end of the movie, The Wall, when the pink character has smashed the hell out of his hotel room. I mean, he's just destroyed everything. He shaves off his eyebrows, he shaves off his hair, he just destroys, he smashes everything that he owns. It's a metaphor for going through total underworld experience, total chaos. He almost commits suicide. But the movie doesn't leave you with that, nihilistic ending. What you then see him do later on is he takes every single piece of everything he broke and he arranges it in a new mandala. It's actually in the movie, you can watch it. He takes everything that he broke and he rearranges it in a new pattern. This is very Zen, this is very Taoist, because in fact, in one lesson that the Taoists had, the Zen masters used to teach their disciples about perfection. Very much the truth, what we're talking about. What is it? And they would have this particular lesson for the monks, for the people who were trying to gain enlightenment. And the master would say to the disciples, I'm going to hold up... what would happen actually physically is they would take them to the pottery area. And the lesson was that you had to make the perfect bowl. And that's all the master would say. In order to pass this particular lesson, or this rite, this part of the ritual, you have to create the perfect bowl. And we don't care how long it takes you or what happens, but, And so the pupils would go off and they try to make this perfect bowl out of the clay. And then they'd bring it to the master. And of course, he'd be dismissing one after the other, going, okay, good, yeah, right, move on. Not perfect. Until basically every single pupil had not gained the perfection. And so finally one of the disgruntled, pupils would go, like, hey, what the hell is this, I mean, we got, 300 students here and, you keep on telling us it's not the perfect one, then you make it. And so the teacher in the story lifted one of the bowls and held it up, right? And then in a split second, he dropped it as if by accident, and it smashed on the floor into like hundreds of pieces. And he asked one of the students to sweep up all the pieces and take it over to another part of the school where the gold masters were, where they made the jewelry or where they melted gold, right? And he said, ask the goldsmith to glue all the pieces back together for us and use gold to do it. After a couple of hours or days, whatever, the bowl returns and the master holds it up in front of the class and goes, here is the perfect bowl. Because it embodies not only creation, which is what you all guys were doing, it also embodies destruction. As your breath does, as the creation does, as nature does.
So it has the balance, in other words, the balance of both.
The balance of both. And in the Western world, and maybe even for hundreds and hundreds of years, we have lost this. We understand it intellectually, perhaps. And I'm not including everybody. I'm not making a general statement here. But on the whole, we are a very acquisitive people. We've been mind-controlled into something that's actually quite destructive. The destruction we're going towards is the destructiveness of complete yang mentality, complete acquisition. And I mean that even in a psychological way. We've lost the ability to be feminine. We've lost the ability to understand this deconstructive principle in life. And yet, that happens in our lives all the time. So half the neurosis that you see, half the psychological and emotional meltdown from children to husbands and wives, when somebody leaves, when somebody dies, when a job is lost, when fame passes you by, when material wealth is lost, you see, whatever it might be, a great sportsman being eclipsed by other younger guys, or a beautiful model saying, oh, yeah, they don't want to know me now, whatever it might be, all that fallout and depression and chaos and anxiety and frustration is born out of the fact that we cannot handle this flow, this yin and yang, this idea that your time comes and then it moves on, do something else, change. There's a movement, there's a rhythm in life. And we have lost this ability because we always fixed. It's the same thing for science. This goes into lots of different areas. And so we've forgotten how to make that perfect bowl. We've forgotten how to come into a relationship with this deconstruction. And yet, as I said, all around us, that force exists. That force is not going to stop. It's going to be in our lives. It's happening every day. Millions of cells in our bodies die. People do leave. Change will occur. So if we don't fall in love with that change and work with it, then we remain static. And unfortunately, nature does not permit anything to be static. And if you continue to be static, if you absolutely go too far with that model, then nature arranges it so that forces will come in that we might then erroneously label destructive, when in fact those are the agents of greater healing. And in fact, that's why sanity and sanitize, I've always said, are very connected. Because forces that we now, in this age, in this world right now, think are destructive, are actually not destructive. We are destructive. Our thinking has become destructive. Our thinking has become anti-life, pseudo-love, pseudo-life, pseudo-reality. And therefore, the other forces that are really living and vital, that take care of all the universe, the stars, the leaves, the trees, the water, that cycle is in perfect unison and balance. and it's going to make sure that we also fall into balance.
Amazing.
Now, this principle is existing, and it exists in our bodies. So as I said earlier on, it ties into the fact that if a person meets psychosis, or if they meet a type of breakdown, in a much broader context, you also have to look at why that is. Maybe that person has not dealt with their impurities. Maybe that person hasn't got a clear grasp of reality. Maybe that person is on this journey for wrong reasons. Motive is very, very important in all of this.
That's right. If you try to get into any kind of truth movement or any kind of movement with the wrong mentality of what you want this for. Why do you want the truth? If you want it so you can get chicks, or if you want it so you can get famous, or so you can make a lot of money, or you're trying to
get one up.
Yeah, get one up on other people, then it's not going to work out for you.
And of course, esoteric knowledge by definition is very alluring for a lot of people, even for the intellectual set who get bored by jumping through the hoops and they want more power, or just generally, as you say, acquisitive people. People who think that they can get something material out of it. And they're not realizing, because of course there's no actual warning. It's not like you're buying a CD where the warning's right in the front of it, or a drink or alcohol. Unfortunately, when you dabble in occult areas, you're now being tested. And therefore, your motive is going to matter. It ties into what I was saying earlier about the end of the journey. It's like some sort of T.S. Eliot thing where in our endings is our beginnings. You're going to end up meeting yourself again. In a way, it is a little bit like karma. It might be a sort of subset of the karmic idea that you're going to meet that down the line. But even leaving that aside, the idea is that your motives, the reason why you get into something, is in a way going to walk with you, and it's going to skew you, and it's going to lead your path into areas that another person may not walk. That's why I emphasize to the caller how important it is to keep the individual compass in mind and never let that be stolen from you, and never also sell it yourself, because you may walk for a while with other people who are like-minded. But in the end, their road may not go where you want to go, or you may not want to go where they want to go. You see, because there's nothing uniform about any of this. It's a purely mutable thing. And this, I feel, has been lost, and partly because of the influence of religion. It's one of the biggest critiques I have about religion, is that it's so fixed, it's so immutable. They use the promissory note. They say one one Christ, one book, one set of commandments, one set of behavior, one heaven for you all.
And one hell for those who don't like it.
Oh, that's it. And remember, let's take it, what they say. When they promise you the heaven, when a Christian promises you the heaven, we often never think about this. But the heaven that they're promising us is absolutely fixed. All people will enter one zone. And all people will have to do the same rules. Can't we see the regimentation in all of this? The same Savior, the same code, the same church, the same practices, and in the end, the same heaven. I'm not making any comment about it. I'm just saying, observe the fact that, does this really gel with anybody's logic circuits to imagine that, a life after death is all going to be one exact same thing for everybody? I mean, does that make any sense to anyone?
No, it doesn't. It's kind of like asking a complete stranger, how do I get home? Well, that stranger's going to know how they get home, but they don't know how you get home. That your home is your home. So whenever they say, well, this is how I get home, it's not how you get home. It's how they get home.
And that same metaphor is taken up in the very first episode of the Prisoner series with Patrick McGowan. He arrives in the village, and he can't work out what on earth is going on and where he is and what is this place. So one of the first things he does is he goes into the shop and asks for a map. And the guy behind the counter pulls out this map. And number 6 opens it, and he's like looking at it, and of course it's like only the map of the village. There's no map. There's no description of the surrounding areas. It's a completely conformist, collectivized, homogenized view of this location. So he turns around to the guy and goes, look, no, I meant a larger map. So the guy goes away, and basically he brings out another map that's a bit bigger in size physically, and it's color, but it's exactly the same kind of map.
That's funny.
Right? He goes, you don't understand what I mean by bigger. And then if you take the Prisoner series, as I do, to be a metaphor of the soul, because the actual first clip of the Prisoner, is a lightning flash. You hear a loud crack of thunder. And in esoteric symbolism, that's always a sign of the fall of the soul into matter. And there's many other symbols like the car coming from the very center of the screen and all of these different things to imply that number 6 is the soul who gets incarnated into the body, which is a symbol of the car. The car is the vehicle. And then all the rest of it. So then he falls into the village, is the soul itself coming into matter. Now, Patrick McGoohan was an expert in 14th century Mannerist plays, in which the hero in those plays, they're largely Christian, and they're morality tales, and they always center around a man called Everyman. There's actually a character called Everyman, and that was the name of Patrick McGoohan's production company. So he was very, very adept. He was highly skilled at analyzing these highly allegorical Christian. One of the most famous ones is John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress, which everybody knows. That's one of those plays. And there's many, many others as well. So they're very allegorical, they're very symbolic in nature. And that's what The Prisoner is a modern allegory, very much to do with the Pilgrim's Progress and the fall of the soul into the world. And if you take that as being what is going on in the first episode, then you see what he's asking for. He's saying, where am I? I'm in the creation here. I'm in the world. And as a matter of fact, in the early part of the dialogue, in the very, very opening credit scenes, you hear the term saying, we want information. But the way that the word is pronounced is again done subtextually. It's actually, you hear it being said information, which means being informed, that you are actually coming into form. So there's lots of double meanings and double entendres and subtextual stuff there. Not only talking about Big Brother and the worldly demiurge, the worldly archons that control every aspect of your destiny and all the various ways that they try to acclimatize you to the prison. Because remember, ultimately speaking, the control matrix, these controllers, the architects, are not too happy with the rebellious slave or the rebellious inmate. They want you to conform. That's what this Prisoner series was also showing you, and it's very much true for our lives. They want you to be okay with that incarceration. They want you to be part of it, and they want you to also become the prison wardens for everybody else. And many people have done that in the world. They've chosen to do that because it's easy. It's the easy way out. Because as a warden, you get slightly more soup. You get a little bit more perks than the actual prisoner, you see, who's still rebelling. So many of us have become each other's prison wardens, basically. And this is also another danger, which means that before you can even deal with the major oppressor, before you can go up the fractal and really take on something much more elusive, you're already dealing with the kind of, minor tyrants or mini tyrants around you who try to drag you back into the consensus trance. And they have 101 ways of doing that, mostly trying to pull you back into some sort of collective stance or try to prevent you from thinking freely, from debunking the little discoveries that you do make, and all of these other little mechanisms to try and get you to conform, to keep you silent, and to make sure that you stop your journey and you stop your organic flow, or that you lose faith. You lose faith in yourself and the natural flow of the world, that the world will look after you. There's something there that's always going to protect you and look after you. If people can get you out of that thinking, which is done morning, noon, and night. Sometimes people would say even the proximity of other people, this happens. Because we're so susceptible to this kind of influence. So it's very hard. A lot of my religion, what I would call religion or philosophy, is about constantly recentering yourself, and constantly regrounding yourself so that you're not influenced anymore. It goes with what I'm saying about the apophatic. It's not so much that you do something, it's more that you undo something. Life is more about clearing out things so that you always re-find your center again. It's more like an internal process, as opposed to sort of a going out and discovering new things in new ways. It's more like a return, in many ways, to the center of who you really are. And again, I emphasize that meditation is unique to each individual. There's no A to Z telling you how to do that. Each person must find their own way or own particular set of rituals for doing that. For some people, it could be playing music, listening to music, sitting in the garden. For some people, it's washing dishes. I ground myself by just doing housework. That's one of the best ways for me to get out of my blinking head, and just feel like a normal person. you know, and just doing something very humble in a way.